Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the horrible murder of 18-year-old Aliza Parsy. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. Alright, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can get into this video. Now, this is a case that I had never heard of before. It had never been recommended to me. It's actually one that I came upon while I was doing some research on the internet for another case. It's just, I don't know if you've ever done this. If you're researching a case, maybe you would have to do YouTube for this to be a thing. But where you're on one website and then you see all these articles pop up on the right. Right now it's going to look like the left to you because internet. But you look on the right and you see all these articles to other cases. So I'm scrolling, reading about one case, and then I see an article and then the headline captivates me so. I don't want to tell you what the article's headline was because it's going to give a bit away that I think I'm going to present this case in a way that kind of keeps you on your toes and doesn't really let you know what happened here. Okay? It's going to be a mysterious ride. But as soon as I read the article title, I was like, well, now I must know more. So I went and I read it, and I read everything I could, and as I read it, I was shocked and disgusted, and it was just like a lot, but also not a lot, because I found when trying to research this case for a video that it's really hard to research because there's not like a ton of information in very obvious places. So I had to dig a lot, but I did, and I read everything I could, and I watched all the articles. I watched all the interviews I could so that you didn't have to. And now I'm here to tell you all about this case today. Oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I'm so pregnant. It's kind of insane. Like, how am I still here? I don't know, but I'm going to keep leaning with it and rocking with it till I'm physically unable. But I gotta say, if I sound like I can't breathe, it's because there's a little boy in my lungs, apparently. Okay. Yeah, I think I've said all the things I need to say, so now we can go ahead and get into the case. I can stop talking about it and start being about it, or start talking about it like I said I'm going to talk about it, you know what I mean? So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the horrible murder of 18-year-old Aliza Parsy. On August 10th, 2005, the very close, tight-knit Orthodox Jewish community of Willowbrook in Staten Island, New York, was shook to its core when one of their locals, a girl that everyone knew very well, 18-year-old Aliza Parsy, was found dead in her home. This poor girl was found by her mother. Her mother's name was Seema, and Seema had been at work all day, and she got home just before or just after around 8 p.m. and she was just looking forward to having a normal night, just like a chill night with her daughter. Lizzy was her baby, her youngest child. The two still, lived together, and she was excited to come home and just have a night of normalcy, have dinner and chill at home with her kid. But as soon as she entered her home, she quickly saw that it wasn't going to be a normal night, because as she entered her home, she saw that the entire place had clearly been ransacked. There was just shit everywhere, and immediately Seema was like, oh shit, and ran upstairs to her daughter's bedroom because she knew that Lizzy was supposed to be home. I'm calling Eliza Lizzy. Everyone that I saw talk about her called Eliza Lizzy, so if it gets confusing, Eliza Lizzy. So she runs up the stairs to Lizzy's room, knowing that she's supposed to be home. And when she gets up the stairs, she finds that her daughter's bedroom door is locked. So she starts banging on the door and yelling just over and over, like, Lizzy, 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 trying to get some sort of response, but gets none. So obviously this sends her into a panic, and she runs to her phone, and instead of calling police first, she calls Lizzy's work, because her priority at this point is finding her daughter. And she's like, maybe she had to work late, maybe she got called in on a last minute shift, maybe something. So she calls Lizzy's work, and Lizzy's boss is the one that she speaks to. And this does not make her feel any better, because when she asks to speak to Lizzy, this is when the boss tells her, like, Lizzy never showed up for work today. She was supposed to come in. I tried calling her. She never showed up. She never called. She never said anything. She was essentially a no call, no show. No call, no show. So at this point, Seema freaks out and starts like word vomiting on the boss, which I think they knew each other because I know that this boss knew Lizzy pretty well. So she's just telling her like, oh my God, I just got home. The house is ransacked. Lizzy's door's locked. She's not answering. Like, what's going on? She's freaking out. So the boss is like, okay, take a breath. Calm down if you can. You call the police and I'm going to head over to you right now and be there with you so we can figure out what's going on. So this is when Seema does just that. She calls the police and she tells the operator on the phone, like, listen, hey, like, well, okay, she wasn't that casual, obviously. But she's like, I was at work. I got home. My house is destroyed. I've clearly been robbed. My daughter is supposed to be here. She's not, or maybe she is. I don't know. Her bedroom door's closed and locked and she's not responding to me and she's, telling them the whole story. And they're like, okay, listen, we're on our way. We're going to send officers over to you. You need to go outside, get out of the house. So I'm assuming that the dispatcher's like, we don't know what's going on. There could still be somebody in your house. You need to get out. So she goes and waits outside for police to arrive. The NYPD squad from Staten Island, the 122nd precinct, responded to the call and came straight to the home that Seema and Lizzy shared. Once they spoke to Seema, they found out which door was Lizzy's and they went to the door. And when they did, they too did not get a response. So they were like, okay, let's do what we got to do. And they knocked the door down. And once they got inside, they confirmed Seema's biggest fear. This is when they found 18-year-old Aliza Parsy dead in her room. She was stuffed under her mattress with a pillow over her face, and all officers saw when they first entered the room was her feet sticking out from under the mattress. So while this is happening, obviously officers are not allowing Seema, Lizzy's mother, into the house, which I think is probably a good thing. I can see why that would be very frustrating for Seema, but also like, I don't know how you could recover from seeing your child that way, so it's probably good that they didn't let her, even though it was upsetting to her. But while she's outside waiting, losing her mind, Lizzy's boss had showed up, and Lizzy's boss gave no fucks. So she goes up, she like marches herself up to the house, and goes to the officers, and is just kind of like, what the fuck, guys? Like, her mother is out there panicking, you're not giving any updates, what is going on? And this is when police tell Lizzy's boss, like, listen, you need to go out there, you need to be with her right now. We just found Lizzy. She is dead, and this is going to be a really tough time for her. So Lizzy's boss goes back outside with this information, and as soon as Seema learns what happened to her daughter, she collapsed on the front steps. It was just too much for her to handle, which I can't even imagine what that would be like. And at this point, officers have now realized that this isn't just a robbery or a burglary, this is a homicide, so they call a homicide detective, somebody who specializes in that, and he comes straight to the house, and the first thing he does is go to Lizzy's room, obviously, and he starts looking around, and what he notes at first is that Lizzy is on the ground, and her hair is still damp, which led him to believe that she had just gotten out of the shower when she was attacked, that maybe she interrupted somebody in the commission of a crime, got out of the shower while somebody was in there trying to rob the house, and was killed for that reason. But they also noted that she was wearing only a towel, so they thought it was possible that some sort of sexual assault had taken place. One thing that was immediately odd to investigators on this case is that though Lizzy was dead, they found her dead and they believe she was murdered, there were no outward signs of trauma on her body to like give them any idea what had happened to her. There were no stab wounds, no bullet holes, no blood, no like marks around her neck, nothing. She was just laying there peacefully with the pillow on her face. So they were like, that's odd, like what killed this girl? But as they looked further, they found a drop of blood on Lizzy's towel. And this was very telling because Lizzy's body had no outward signs of trauma. No outward signs of trauma, so this blood was likely not hers. So they were like, oh, bug, we got the killer's blood. So they obviously took that to test against potential suspects because they believed this was the DNA of the person who had killed her. So she was, taken from the home, and the medical examiner was going to have his or her work cut out for them because Lizzy was from an Orthodox Jewish community. She was an Orthodox Jewish woman, and in that religion, if you're very, very strict, the funeral is supposed to take place within 24 hours of the person dying. That's just how it works. I didn't know that, which is weird because I at my job, where I work. A lot of the attorneys I work with are Jewish, and we talk about Jewish culture and religion all the time. And I did not know that. It's never come up, but apparently that is the case. So the medical examiner was going to have to work super quickly to find out what had happened here so that she could have her funeral within 24 hours. Anyways, back to the scene before she was taken away, right? I got a little ahead of myself. Police are going through the house, going room by room, trying to collect all the evidence they can, taking note of the whole home. You know what I mean? The whole shebang. Doing what the cops do. So they go room by room and they end up in the bathroom. And this is where they find that the bathtub is still full of water, which showed that Lizzy had either taken a shower or a bath right before she was killed. And her cell phone was actually in the water, which is odd and never explained, but her cell phone was in the bathtub with the water. As they searched further through the house, they came to the back door and they found that the back door of Lizzy's apartment was unlocked. And they were like, fuck, like that's never what you want to see, because in random burglaries, apparently, ladies and gentlemen, the burglar robber will go to multiple doors in a neighborhood just checking to see which one's unlocked. And once they find one that's unlocked, they'll just go in, not knowing who's there, what's behind that door. That's a scary person who will just go into your home having no idea what's going to be behind that door. But apparently that's the common way that it's done. And once they find an open door, they go in and they burgle or they rob. And Lizzy's back door was unlocked. So now the police had found Lizzy and were going to be investigating her murder. They were going to have to figure out who Lizzy was as a person to try to figure out why somebody might want her dead. And in the process of doing this, they were going to be led down some very interesting paths before finding the killer in the place that I think that they least expected it. But to get started with all of that, police first had to answer a very basic question, and that was, who was Aliza Parsy? Aliza Parsy, who went by Lizzy, as I have already said, was a good girl. She was known as being a good girl who was raised by her mother alone. Her mother had been married twice before, having 2 sons, Lizzy's older brothers, whose names were Raviv and Leo, from her first marriage, and then she had Lizzy in her second. Lizzy and her mother were living on their own at the time of the murder, and the two were very close. Lizzy was said as to be treated like a princess. Lizzy was known as just being the type of girl you would want to bring home to mother if you were dating. Like, that was the thing. And seeing as that Lizzy was from a heavily Jewish community and a heavily Jewish family, she would only generally, it would only be appropriate for her to date other heavily Jewish men. So her being like the one that you'd want to bring home to your mom was a big deal in her community. Lizzy was the type of girl who was always smiling. Everyone who talked about her, every interview I saw, talked about that. She always had a smile on her face. She was always laughing, and she was super funny. Lizzy and the type of personality she had was very useful for her after she graduated high school, because she took a job in sales at a moving company. And if you know anything about sales, it's a very specific type of personality who's going to do well at something like that, and you have to have charisma and just be able to connect with people, and she could. And she was taking a year off from school. She was going to go to college because she wanted to save some money, because she wanted to go to college in Manhattan because she had dreams of being a fashion designer. And this was something that she was very passionate about. She told everybody about it. She would even bring her designs. She would draw her designs and then bring them to work and show them to her boss. And her boss wasn't the type of lady who generally mingled with the help, you know what I mean? But there was something about Lizzy that was so warm and inviting that the two talked all the time. And Lizzy would talk to her boss about her hopes and her dreams and her ambitions and her goals. They were very close because Lizzy was easy to be close to. And on top of all of that, Lizzy was also a fun girl, a party girl. She loved going to Manhattan and going into the city with her friends. So her and a bunch of her friends would pile into a van together, and they'd drive to the city and they'd go to the nightclubs and they'd drink and they'd dance and they'd just have a good time. She was just a very typical 18-year-old girl. I did all those things, but me and my friends would pile in a car and go to LA. Now I live here. Full circle moment. But her and her friends would pile in a van, go to Manhattan, same thing. Go to clubs, go drinking, just have a good time and be 18. So with this seemingly normal, wonderful 18-year-old girl being murdered, her neighborhood was thrown into chaos. The night that she died, oh my God, everyone went crazy. Like I said, it was a very tight-knit community. Everyone knew everybody. Everyone was in everybody's business. So when they learned that she had been killed, people flocked out into the street to kind of just see what they could hear from each other, talking to each other, and also see what sort of news coverage was going on. Just the streets were filled with people trying to figure out, just trying to be involved. You know what I mean? Just trying to know what was going on, hear what was going on, talk to people, see what was going on. It's a good sentence. I'm proud of that. Tell me I'm good. So in the midst of all of this craziness that was going on in the streets that night, one of the people who showed up was Lizzy's older brother. This was 27-year-old Raviv Gabay. And as soon as he got there and he saw what was going on, he freaked out. He like ran to the door and tried to get in, and they wouldn't let him in. And they were like, sorry guy, like no one can go in. This is a crime scene. And he was like, that's my mother's house. That's my sister's house. That's my family in there. You have to let me in. And he starts getting intense, which I imagine such a common thing that police have to deal with. That was a weird sound, first off. But it's such a common thing that people feel and police have to deal with. Raviv lived across town. I don't know New York very well, but he lived in Brooklyn with his wife and his newborn baby. And he had been at home when he heard the news of his sister's passing and had rushed right over. And again, as soon as he got there, police were like, no, like you can't come in. And he got very upset and very belligerent, but they were pretty firm on it. They're like, I know, I understand, but you can't come in. So he went and sat with his mother, Seema, to be there and try to console her. And prior to Lizzy's death, Raviv and Seema had sort of been estranged. There had been some family issues with like money, things like that. You know how families are. But in the wake of their shared tragedy, they kind of put that aside and were there for each other and consoled each other, because you know what they say is sometimes it takes a tragedy to bring people together. It's fucked up, but it's true. So anyway, police at this point are like, okay, we need to canvass the area. We need to go door to door. We need to talk to everybody. We need to see what we can find out. And this ended up being the perfect kind of place for police to do this, because as I said, one, super tight-knit community. Everybody knew everybody. On top of that, the area that they lived was very like close quarters. Like all the houses were kind of like right on top of each other. So it was very unlikely that no one saw anything. And on top of that, everybody was kind of like in each other's business anyway. And you were hard pressed to ever like leave your house even to check the mail without running into somebody and having a conversation, because there was always somebody around. So this was the perfect place for police to gather information. And people were very willing to speak to police and tell them everything that they knew. So in doing this and talking to all the neighbors and getting all the information they could, they did learn that there had been some strange men in the neighborhood around the time that Lizzy was killed. There had been 4 or 5 men landscapers who were working on a nearby house. So police obviously followed up on this lead the way they follow up on every lead, but they weren't really sold on this being wow, okay. I don't think my brain's connected anymore. Police weren't sold on Lizzy being killed by a random intruder or this being a crime of opportunity for a couple of reasons. The crime scene was speaking to them. Lizzy herself was speaking to them. They looked at her and they looked at the scene and they were like, why did the killer cover your body? Why did the killer cover your face? This is the type of thing that's much more common when the victim and the killer know each other, because the killer is trying to sort of separate themselves from the awful thing they're doing by covering their face, a thing that makes them human. So it makes them easy, makes it easier for them to go through with what they're actually, with the murder. Because it's hard to kill somebody, you know what I mean? Especially if you're not a crazy person. So police really thought there was a good chance that Lizzy knew her killer. Like, okay, was the house ransacked? Yes. Was the back door unlocked? Yes. Did it look like there had been a burglary and things had gone wrong and Lizzy had been killed? Yes. But could someone who knew Lizzy and had killed Lizzy had staged the scene to make it look like this to take suspicion off themselves? Also yes. So with that knowledge locked, that's going to get somebody, it's going to trigger somebody. With that knowledge in their brains, police decide they need to speak to Lizzy's family. They need to speak to her mother. They need to speak to her brother, which sucks, man. It sucks that so soon after you experience this sort of loss, you have to immediately speak to police. Like, that has to be so difficult and so raw, but it is important for police to do that, because the beginning of the investigation is the most important time. It's when you're getting the most evidence. It's going to get the case solved quicker. So they go to Seema and Raviv and they speak to them. They want to question them. They take DNA samples so that they can test them later, and they like do exclusions, and they ask them like, okay, where were you guys on this day? when this happened. And Seema tells them that she had been at work all day, and Raviv says that he had also been at work. He had been in Long Island delivering cookies because the family owned like a bakery, and he would go and deliver the cookies. So like, cool. Do you guys know anyone who may want to hurt Lizzy? And this is when they get their first sort of lead, because Raviv, her brother, does know somebody that he thinks might want to hurt Lizzy, and that's Lizzy's ex-boyfriend. Raviv told police that Lizzy's ex-boyfriend, a recent ex-boyfriend, had been of the Muslim faith, and because he was Muslim and Lizzy was Jewish, her family was like not into the two of them dating, because again, they wanted her to end up with another Jewish man. They were very old school. That was what they believed. That's what they thought was right. And Lizzy was like, cool, like, I'll do what you say. She didn't really care. So she broke up with him. And she told him at the time, like, I'm sorry, like, it's not anything with us. It's just that I will be disowned if we keep dating. Like, we can't. And she was kind of cool with it. She was kind of like, okay, it's over. It was an out of sight, out of mind thing for her. And she quickly moved on and was just kind of like over it. So she wasn't that into it to begin with, clearly. But he did not move on so quickly. It hit him a lot harder. And he was having a lot of trouble accepting that it was over. He was just still in love with her, and the breakup hit him like a ton of bricks. And to sort of illustrate how unhinged he had become with the breakup is one day after Lizzy had ended things with him. This is going to make you so uncomfortable. Lizzy had broken up with him. She had just been sleeping, as one does. She wakes up, she looks over, and her ex-boyfriend is in her house, in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her sleep. That's not... It's very Kanye of him, and we don't like that. We don't like to hear that, no. Boys, men, people, don't do things like that. It's not cool. It's horrifying. So upon hearing this information, police are like, okay, we need to speak to this guy, we need to talk to him yesterday. We need to get on that. So they're very stoked. They're like, we have a lead. Let's go get this fucking guy. But before they can even like go out and start trying to locate him, to bring him in, to question him, another officer comes up to them and they're like, hey, you remember that boyfriend that you were interested in talking to? Well, he's here right now at the crime scene. And they're like, okay, like bring him over here. We would like to speak to him right now. So they talk to him. And they're like, hey, we would very much like to question you more formally. Would you mind coming down to the station so we can do so? And he's like, absolutely no problem. Let's go. So they go down to the station and they bring him in to question him, but it was more of an interrogation because they were very suspicious. So they bring him in. They question him. They ask him about his whereabouts when she was killed. They ask him about that weird encounter on the edge of her bed. And at the end of the interview, somehow they actually did not think it was him. He was not making their lizard brains tingle. And on top of that, he gave a DNA sample, which they did test and later found that it did not match the DNA that was found on Lizzy's towel. So this guy just like wasn't the guy. He was sketch, but he wasn't the guy. And something that I really liked in this case when I was looking into it was one of the investigators on the case actually said that during this investigation, they made a very good point of making sure not to get tunnel vision. So basically they were saying that they didn't like come to a conclusion on the case and just try to make all the evidence they had fit that conclusion and like disregard things that didn't fit. Like in this case, they could have like really made a case for the boyfriend, like circumstantial case for the boyfriend being guilty and like not even focus on the DNA. But instead they let the evidence talk to them. And as soon as they found like this obviously couldn't be the guy, they moved on and went down another alley, went down another route to try to find the real killer. And like, that does sound so like, duh, like that's how it should be, but that's not how it always is. So I really liked seeing that in this case, the investigator was like, we didn't want to get tunnel vision. It clearly wasn't him, so we moved the fuck on. So they did just that. They moved on, and they ended up moving on to those landscapers that the neighbors had mentioned had been there. Remember the 4 to 5 landscapers? Well, they were able to somehow track them down, and they questioned each of them. They took DNA from each of them. They tested it against the DNA found on Lizzy. And again, none of these men were a match either. So again, they were at a dead end. Lizzy's funeral was a very sad one. I don't know if you've ever been to a Jewish funeral. They're the saddest things. It's like this. It's one of the saddest things I've ever done, especially the Jewish funeral of a teenage girl who's been murdered. Like, it's so fucking sad. Not that all funerals aren't sad, but I don't know if you know, some of you know, but I had 2 friends that were murdered. One of them was a 16-year-old Jewish girl, and her funeral was the saddest day, I think, still ever that I've experienced. And her boyfriend, who was also killed, his funeral was the next day, and his was not a Jewish funeral. And it's just like a very different feeling. It's just very heavy and just very sad. And on top of it being a Jewish funeral for a teenager who was murdered, it happened so quickly after she was killed, because remember, they need to have it within 24 hours. So everyone's raw. There are no answers. So everybody's just sitting here looking at each other, wondering, like, how did this happen? Why was Lizzy murdered? But they don't have answers yet because it's happening so quickly. It's just so sad. So her funeral happened, and the cops were actually there. The police came. 1, because they wanted to make a good relationship with the family. And 2, they wanted to kind of keep their eyes peeled and see who was there and how they were acting. Because remember, they think it's likely, or it's possible, that her killer was somebody who knew her. It ended up being good that the police were present at the funeral, because Lizzy's ex-boyfriend showed up. And I mean, tensions are already high, right? Like, this is a very tense situation. Everybody's very upset. The emotions are very raw on the surface. And this ex-boyfriend shows up. And this is the same ex-boyfriend that her brother had said may have had a reason to hurt her. And so people had some preconceived thoughts about him. So when he showed up, all hell broke loose, because he tried to walk towards Lizzy's casket. And when he did, her brother rushed him and attacked him, and a huge fight broke out. So fortunately, the police were there at that time, and they were able to break up the fight, because I cannot even imagine how intense that could have gotten. I love you so much, but you need to stop. After Lizzy's funeral, police head over to meet with the medical examiner to hear from them what their determination had been after doing their speedy review of Lizzy's body. And this is when they learned that she had been killed by a manual suffocation from the pillow being pressed over her nose and mouth, and also compression to her neck. And this, to kill somebody this way, takes like a while, dude. Like, you can quickly become unconscious by this, but it takes minutes to kill somebody like this. So when police learn that, they are starting to feel like they are pretty... So police were feeling at this point that they were on the right track with thinking that this is somebody who knew Lizzy and not a stranger, because killing somebody this way is generally personal, and it's generally not premeditated. 2 other things came out of this report that ended up being positive, I guess, if you can take anything positive away from somebody being murdered. And one was that though Lizzy was found wearing only a towel, it did not appear that she had been sexually assaulted, which is great, obviously. It did, however, appear that she had had consensual sexual intercourse within 24 hours of being killed. There was DNA and stuff to show that, but it didn't look like she had been raped. So this did give them at least somebody to look at to find out, like, who she had been sleeping with. And in addition to this, they found that Lizzy also had DNA under her fingernails from her scratching her attacker. So she clearly fought back and made sure that there would be evidence there to help police find her killer. So police move on, and now they're going to be questioning Lizzy's friends, because they're figuring that an 18-year-old girl from such a strict family might not be as open with her mother, with her family, about her intimate life, her sex life, as she would be with her friends. So they talk to her friends, and this is when they learn, like, some pretty basic stuff that they already knew. They learned about the clubbing, they learned about the dancing, they learned about, like, a smidge of underage drinking. You know, the stuff that we all did. At least the stuff that me and my friends did. I don't know your life. I don't want to assume that we are the same. But they also learned something that kind of, like, piqued their interest. It made their ears perk up a little bit. They learned that Lizzy had made a habit of meeting men off the internet. All the guys who were in her close circle, who lived near her, were all her friends, and they were all like brothers to her. They weren't really the types of guys that she wanted to end up with. So she would meet up with potential suitors that she met on the internet. Now, this is kind of normal now. I feel like that's how everyone's meeting everyone. Everyone's like on apps and shit. But back then in 2005, it wasn't quite as common. And to be quite honest, it's still not safe. Maybe we don't do that, guys. Maybe we don't meet strangers from the internet. Says the girl who met her husband on MySpace. Okay. Do as I say, not as I do. This is your mother speaking. Do as I say, not as I do. So obviously, police have to look into this, but at this point, they don't even know where to begin. Like, the internet was so new and foreign to these investigators. One of the investigators didn't even have an email address at this time, so he was like, chat rooms? Okay. So they decide they're going to outsource this a little bit and bring in some new people. So they bring in some cyber crime detectives to handle this portion of the investigation. They were tasked with the task of going through Lizzie's computer, all of her internet history. I'm not really savvy on this kind of stuff either, but they basically had to they had to make a list of every single person that she talked to on the internet, and then vet every single one of these people, go into them, find out who they were, find out where they lived, find out their alibis, find out if they had ever met. Like, they had to go through all these people and find out all of this stuff. And can you even imagine? That sounds so daunting to me. And then I think about how investigations must be like now, considering all we do is talk to everyone on the internet. That must be so difficult. It sounds impossible, but they did it. Somehow they do find something that's useful here, and they actually felt like they had struck gold when they found a specific conversation between Lizzy and a potential suitor. And her and this guy were talking, and they had actually made plans to meet at 10 a.m. the day before Lizzy was murdered. And they had the entire thing planned out. They had it planned out so he would show up at a certain time so that Lizzy's mother would not be home, so that they could have their privacy. They planned for her to just leave the door unlocked so he could just slip in without needing to knock and bringing attention from the neighbors. For investigators, this seems almost too good to be true. So they look into this guy and they are able to trace him to Brooklyn. They go, they bring him in for questioning, and boy, did they question him. And from doing this, they found that yes, he did know Lizzy. Yes, he had met up with Lizzy. Yes, the two had even had sex. They had had sex on multiple different occasions, and he had had sex with her just the day before she was killed at that 10 a.m. meetup that they had planned, but that he had nothing to do with her murder. But they're still kind of like, guy, this seems incredibly suspicious, and we kind of think it's you. So they get a subpoena for his phone and his computer records so they can kind of look into his story and try to match it up with timelines, try to find out exactly where he was, what they talked about, where his phone might have pinged at different places, and see if his alibi matches up, or alternatively, if his cell phone showed that he had been in Lizzy's area when Lizzy was killed. They also took his DNA so they could test it against the DNA that was found in the towel, and guess what? It also did not match. What's super fucked up about this, though, this whole cyber sex crime bullshit, is because police investigated that angle, this got out to the media, and the media ran with it and started reporting on the fact that cyber sex could have had something to do with her murder, and that she essentially lived like a high-risk lifestyle and could have contributed to her own death, just completely assassinating her character. And it wasn't helpful at all. It wasn't helpful to the investigation. It definitely wasn't helpful to her family, her poor mother, who had to learn about the stuff that her daughter was doing after the fact and read all about this while mourning the murder of her daughter. It's so frustrating and gross that just happens. It reminds me so much of the of Jennifer Levin's murder, the preppy murder, where basically the media just completely assassinated her character as well and tried to make it seem like she was responsible for her death. It's just so gross. Like, why is it? And it's always women. It's always women. Like, no one cares what a man does sexually. No one cares about their sex lives, but when it's a woman involved, it must have something to do with it. It's just so frustrating. Whatever. She, woman, man haters club, we can all join, says the woman who's about to be the mother of a son who will grow up to be a man. Lord, bear me strength. The theories of what happened in this case just went wild. It was a man that Lizzy met on the internet and she was killed over some cyber sex nonsense. It was her ex-boyfriend who had the mentality of, if I can't have you, no one can. Or some people thought that it was somebody who was targeting Jewish women or Jewish human beings just simply for being Jewish. And that's not that hard to wrap your mind around, considering what a fucking horrible history there is there and what a reality that is. It's just there was a lot going on. And there weren't answers, so people were just making up things, which is so common. When you don't know the answers, you start filling in the blanks with whatever you think might fit. People were just freaking out. Lizzy's family was freaking out. Lizzy's family was stressed. They were calling police all the time for updates, especially her brother Raviv, asking like, why aren't there any answers? Why hasn't the boyfriend been arrested yet? It was just like very intense, and it was a lot, and it's reasonable for you to have so many questions and demand answers, but there just weren't any answers to be given yet. The first huge, and I mean huge, break came for this case on September 13th, so about a month after Lizzy had been murdered. And that's when the medical examiner called the police and was like, hey, that DNA that you found on Lizzy's towel and under her nails, well, we have a hit. So basically the lab had been going through and testing every single DNA sample that had been taken throughout the duration of the investigation and systematically ruling them out one by one until they finally got a hit. Now, who do you think it was the DNA was a match for? I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm going to give you a second. You can pause the video. You can leave your guess down below. Out of everyone we've discussed so far, because they have been discussed, whose DNA was found on Lizzy at the crime scene? Go ahead and leave it down below. But don't wait until I say it and then comment it down below, because then you're a big liar. Let's be honest onions here, okay? Leave your guesses down below. It was her goddamn brother Raviv's DNA, dude. Under her nails. The blood on her towel. The same brother who had been fucking hounding police for answers. The same brother who put police on to the trail of her ex-boyfriend. It was her brother Raviv's DNA at the crime scene. Can you believe it? Did you know? Did you have an idea? Because I wanted to do this case in a way where you weren't really sure what happened. So let me know. Were you surprised or did you suspect him from the beginning? Okay, though I did exaggerate a little bit. They didn't like test the DNA and be like, bam, it's Raviv's. What the medical examiner did was they were able to test it and find that it was a male relative of Lizzy's. So then they went through each male relative and tested each of their DNA until they landed on Raviv. But either way, the DNA was a match for Raviv. So like, what the fuck? And police are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. They're like, what the fuck? Why would he do that? What is the motive for this crime? It didn't make sense. Right away, they wanted to arrest him because he's a fucking murderer. But they kind of like pumped the brakes a little bit because he looked, at least to the public, to be a distraught and grieving brother. So they didn't want to just bring him in until they had even more evidence to solidify what they already knew, which was that he had murdered his sister. At this point, though, he is definitely their number one suspect. So they start looking into him. They get like access to his cell phone records, and they also get access to all of the like outdoor surveillance cameras that would have been on his route that day where he was delivering cookies. Because you remember he said he was delivering cookies to Long Island. So they start looking at outdoor cameras to kind of put together a timeline to see if he was where he said he was or if he was in Staten Island murdering his sister. When they checked Raviv's alibi more closely, they were able to determine that he had gone across the Verrazona Bridge around 1 p.m., headed in the direction of Lizzy's home, and that he was actually in Staten Island and a block away from the home an hour later. So not in Long Island like he said, which is over an hour away. So now that they see this, police are like, okay, we need this guy to explain himself. Like, sir, we need you to explain yourself, sir. So they call him. And they're like, hey, could you like come down to the station? We want to question you a little bit further, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, the thing about it is I'm a very busy man and I'm super busy today. I don't really have the time to like come to you. So he's probably feeling like, oh shit, like why do they want to talk to me again? But then they're like, well, here's the thing. It's just that we have a suspect in mind, a friend of Lizzy's ex-boyfriend that we wanted to talk to you about, see if you could identify, see if you know this guy, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, you have a suspect. You have a suspect in mind. And it's not me. Okay, yeah. I will be right there to help you identify and arrest that suspect. And so he heads over to meet the officers, obviously. On September 19th, 2005, Raviv arrived at the police station with his wife. She was led to the waiting area while he was taken into an interrogation room, and as he sat there, they noted that he had scratch marks on his face. I'm not really sure how they missed that the first time around, but sure. Anyways, they sit him down, and pretty quickly he realizes that they don't have another suspect, that they are looking at him, they're looking at him hard, and he denies everything. So they presented to him everything that they had against him. The inconsistencies with his alibi, the fact that they have proof that he was near the home at the time of her murder, the DNA under her fingernails, the blood on the towel, everything. And he was just like, wasn't me. Saw him banging in the shower, wasn't me. Saw us banging on the sofa, it wasn't me. That was his like go-to. So police were like, okay. And they decided to go in a different direction, which proved to be very, very effective with Raviv. Police tell Raviv, like, you know, the word on the street is that Lizzy was sexually assaulted. So when we arrest you, and we will arrest you, obviously we're going to be arresting you now, sir, everyone is going to think that you sexually assaulted your own little sister. Do you want that to be the narrative that's out there? Because if you don't tell us what happened and tell us your side of the story, that's what people are going to hear and that's what people are going to think. Your own mother is going to think that you sexually assaulted your own little sister. And this definitely rattled him and got him wanting to talk. And obviously at this point, police know that that's not the case. They have already determined that she wasn't sexually assaulted, that she had had consensual sex within 24 hours of her being killed, probably with that guy she had met on the internet. Yeah, the guy that came the morning before. That's probably what accounted for the activity. But they don't tell Raviv this, and he doesn't know this. So this freaks him out, and he's like, okay, I'll tell you what happened. So Raviv Gabay was 27 years old and newly married. He and his new wife were living in his new in-laws' home in a sort of basement apartment of their large home. Her family was well off, so he started feeling the pressure to be a provider, and a substantial one at that. And he believed that he was going to be able to do so because when he and his wife were married, his mother had gifted him the family's bakery business. What a present, can you imagine? Jeebus. Anyways, Raviv didn't think this was a good enough gift because it wasn't as profitable as he thought it would or should be, and therefore felt his mother still owed him a gift, a bigger and better gift. What a selfish fuck. Like, first off, like, shut up, go away. Like, ugh, I hate people so much. Anyway, he had learned that his mother had recently come into some money because there had been a home in Israel that was sold after her divorce, something like that. And naturally, Raviv, the selfish little fuck, thought that he was entitled to some of that money. So, the day of the murder, Raviv had been planning to go and deliver cookies in Long Island for his job, but out of nowhere, he was like, you know what I should do? You know, it's a great idea. You know, it sounds absolutely wonderful that I should do instead. I should go and rob my mother. She has that money. I should go and steal it because, like, she's at work right now. Great. Lizzy's at work right now. Fantastic. This is prime time, my baby. So instead of going to deliver cookies in Long Island, he went to Staten Island. Long Island, Staten Island, yes. To rob his mother. So he goes in the house and he starts going room by room, ransacking everything, going through all the drawers. I don't know if he thought that she just kept the cash in the house. I don't know if she was like the type of lady who would generally do that, like not trust the banks, but that's what he was doing, trying to find whatever he could to steal. In the process of this, he says, Lizzy came out. He had no idea she was home. She had been in the bathroom, taking her shower, taking her bath. She comes out. She sees him. And he says that she jumped on his back and started attacking him and scratching him. He doesn't know if she knew it was him. He just knows that she attacked him. And in response, he grabbed her and he flipped her off of him. And when he did, she slammed her head into the box spring of her bed. And he says at that point he just panicked, that he put a pillow on her face, he put the mattress on top of her to conceal her, and he bounced. But you remember they did an autopsy, and they determined, one, she didn't have some giant head wound from smacking her head into the box spring like he said. And it had been proven that she was manually suffocated and that the mattress couldn't have done this. This is something that he had to have sat there and did. So his story was kind of bullshit, but he had implicated himself in being involved, so they were able to arrest him, and he was subsequently arrested, and he was charged with second-degree murder, which would have came with 25 years to life in prison. And while he was in prison awaiting trial, they confiscated his passport because he was also an Israeli citizen, and they were worried that if he had his passport, that he may try to just straight up dip. And it's kind of weird, like, that they confiscated his passport because I believe he was held without bail also. So, like, he wasn't getting out anyway, so I don't know why they needed his passport, but either way. Maybe, I guess, in case he escaped. But either way, he's arrested. And poor Seema, man, Lizzy's mom, to have your daughter murdered, and then to learn it was your own son who did it, and because to like steal your money. That's so much information. I can't even imagine how that woman felt. The first time she saw her son at trial, this poor woman, he's like being ushered into the courtroom, and she started to scream at him first in Hebrew and then in English, and she just screamed, "Why, why, why?" The DA on this case said of the murder, and I quote, "He came to the house for the purpose of looking and finding a large amount of money that he believed was in the home. He ransacked the home. There was a struggle. Eliza fought. He was scratched repeatedly, and in response to that, he suffocated Aliza Parsy." In the end, Raviv Gabe ended up pleading guilty to first-degree manslaughter as opposed to murder because intent could not be proven. They could not prove that Raviv had gone there with the intention of killing Lizzy, and he had never admitted that he had intended to kill Lizzy, so they weren't able to get him on that charge. So he was instead sentenced to 18 years. And the first time he would have been eligible for parole was in 2021, actually. But I looked online, I scoured the internet, and I couldn't find anything that showed that he had even tried to be released. I know that there have been a ton of delays because of COVID. I know that there are some courthouses, at least in California, that are already closing down again because of the surge. It's like a whole thing. So I'm really curious to see what happens. That could be why we haven't heard anything about his impending release, because maybe they haven't even had his hearing yet because of things getting continued. But I'm really curious if he will be released. And I don't know if he should. It does sound like it could have been an accident, but he did also kill her during the commission of another crime. Like he was trying to rob his mother, burgle his mother. And man, just to be able to kill your own sister, your baby sister, and then to have like the cunning and the foresight to try to lead police in a different direction and like get the heat off of you and implicate a totally innocent person, him trying to get her ex-boyfriend on police's radar and arrested, him being okay with having somebody else go down for the murder he committed, that's really ballsy, dude. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel like he should be released. I'm very curious as to what you think. So please, question of the day. Let me know down below. Should he ever be released, and did his punishment fit his crime? But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all of the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Lizzy with me today. What happened to her is so fucked up, dude. Just to be at home, murdered in your home. You're getting ready for work, something that already no one wants to be doing. Like, no one wants to be getting ready for work. You're trying to think of ways to no longer have to go there, right? So she's getting ready for work, and she's killed in her home. And she's killed by her brother who's broken into her home to rob her mother. That's so messed up. She was 18 years old, and her life was stolen from her for absolutely no reason. And that's so sad. And then, like, her story is just so untold. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I've never heard it before. When I looked it up online, there are no videos on her case, and it just surprised me because it's so crazy to me. Her brother murdered her and then tried to frame, well, not really try to frame, but tried to push police in the direction of her ex-boyfriend to get him arrested for the crime. Like, that's just messed up, man. I don't know. But anyways, please let me know down below of any cases you would like to see me cover. As you know, I have a very long list. But every time you leave a suggestion, I add it to the list. And if I cover it, I want to give you a shout out because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Of course, if you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, I've got all my social media linked down below, listed down below for your convenience, along with, well, I was going to say the makeup I used, but I didn't put makeup on today. You may have noticed that because I am exhausted. I can't even believe I'm still filming. A lot of people are like, how are you working so hard when you're so pregnant? And I don't know how to answer the question. I work 7 days a week. I work like 12 hours a day. I'm still pushing, but like I had to just do the makeup before this time. And I hope that you don't mind. I did say that this would happen, and it hasn't happened that many times. So, you know. But what will be down there? Oh, a link to my merch store. I've got lots of merch for you if you want to buy a t-shirt. This isn't one of them. This is the shirt that people wore at Ted Bundy's execution. Because fuck that guy. But I'll have some stuff linked down below for you if you want to see it. And I think that's it. I think I've said all the things that I want to say, haven't I? Is there anything else? I guess not. So with that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. and I hope to see you in my next video.